Okay.
Chair, I think we're ready. We've met quorum, so we're ready to begin.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. It's great to
Morning.
see you virtually. I now call this meeting to order at 9:04 a.m. First item up on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any guests in the room or on Zoom that would like to make a comment?
Not seeing anyone in the room or online.
All righty, let's move on to discussion, oral communications and member updates. Is there anyone or any members who have updates that they would like to share that has to do with the work that we currently do as a HAC committee? Not seeing or hearing anything, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes from September 26th of 2024. Is there anybody that would make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Chair addition. Hold on, I see that Jacqueline Saito has her hand up for a
Okay.
comment.
Thank you.
Hi, I was just wondering, do we have a quorum today?
We do have a quorum, Jacqueline.
All right, thank you.
So is there a second to the motion?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. We're going on to the executive director's report. And you have the floor, Molly.
Thank you, Chair Brose. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to October Housing Advisory Committee. This is actually going to be our last official meeting until we have more fun coming up in the next couple of months with our housing forum in November, and then we have our annual luncheon in December. So I can't tell you how extremely excited I am for the housing forum. So I'm very, very grateful for all of you who will join, but we're gonna be quite the cast that we're gleaning to be able to lend some incredible expertise and credibility to what we're doing. So well, you'll get updates a little bit later. Few updates I wanted to share with you all. First, I just want to start with appreciation and thanks for this committee for the discussion that we had last month on our Section 18 framework. And it was very engaging and really understanding what is the overall purpose and objectives we're trying to balance when we do a disposition like selling 60 public housing homes. There's obviously those residents have to come first, how they secure either future housing or potentially purchase their own homes. I really appreciated the actual conversation we had around the best ways to promote generational wealth through the way we're using our resources and our subsidy programs. So we will, we actually took that advice in mind, and I know Jill already sent an email out, but I just wanted to personally express the reason why we have HAC. The crux of the work we do here is to have that kind of dialogue and discussion and deeper dive in the policies and get us grounded back again in what our objectives are. So we were able to work with our Office of Community Development and make sure we were still honoring One Washington, but it made sense to think about a shorter length of affordability by which those first-time home buyers that income qualify, that get to benefit from the subsidy, will be able to realize the full amount of appreciation. So we were able to we lowered that debt forgiveness portion of it from 30 years down to 15, still doing it in a tiered, but an accelerated tiered way across that 15 years. So thank you for pushing us on that. And that's why we have this work together. I just wanted
Made a difference?
Thank you, Dave. And the board approved it, so, and they really were appreciative of the work that you guys received for us, so thank you for that. Also, just wanted to highlight, this is a little bit, might be sharing a little bit too much, but it's a little personal for me. But I apparently share the birthday of the Housing Choice Voucher, not the birthday, but the year the Housing Choice Voucher program was launched 50 years ago. And we got to celebrate nationally with 7 hours is a long celebration across the country of this crucial and perhaps the most significant housing intervention we have to address poverty and housing stability. I just want to highlight in the Washington County, we're able to use the Housing Choice Voucher Program to help 2,732 low-income families, individuals, seniors, people with disabilities, help them pay their monthly rent. I think one thing we have learned in 50 years is incomes do not match the rent level escalations that we have seen. The housing costs have accelerated at a greater rate than particularly when you look at income in terms of net present value or in terms of inflation. Our incomes just don't keep up overall. And then when we look at how incomes are spread across the population, we do see a widening gap between the rich and the poor, which makes a program like Housing Choice Voucher all the more crucial, because one thing that we were doing in the 20s and 30s is we built out public housing, and we created really concentrated communities where people were very poor altogether. And with Housing Choice Voucher, I'm gonna be creating choice, created an opportunity for people to live in high opportunity neighborhoods, and where when the actual housing that is cheaper. Just wanted to show us that. And it was they keep accelerating and high performing from standards, so that's really important too for us. The other thing the board did is we got also approval to move forward of what we call our phase 2 renovation of our permanent supportive housing community called Heartwood Commons. For those of you who may recall, Heartwood is was sort of like a turnkey kind of project, but it was when we used housing bonds and supportive housing services money to do Washington County's first 100% permanent supportive housing project, 54 units. Now that we've been in there and owning it for a while, guess what? There's still more rehab needs. So once a rehab, always rehab. And we have a little bit of bond money left, and we're going to do that to now, not just the first phase is really focused on converting it to residential code. Now we need to move towards how do we extend the useful life of its systems and energy efficiency and new windows and the things that that weren't really captured in that first phase. So I'm thrilled that we'll be looking at roof and window replacements, exterior stucco replacement. Oh, stucco. Plumbing repipe, also ADA. We didn't, we need to really expand our ADA work on the project, and also HVAC for common areas and hallways, and landscaping, and a whole redesign of our common area. Sure, we're promoting safety and there. So that is going to move forward. And this past month, Washington County Board of Commissioners recognized for the first time World Homeless Day on October 10th. Really, that the World Homeless Day is meant to raise the needs who are experiencing homelessness in our community and to promote the work we do in local communities to alleviate suffering and prevent that for people who are in elements. This is particularly important for us because in 3 years, we really looked out the whole homeless system care with the supportive housing services and seen the fruits of that labor being able to significantly reduce unsheltered homelessness in our community and shut down all of our medium and large size encampments over the last 3 years. And I just want to proud of the work we were doing here in Washington County, but the most important thing is that we work in partnership with our community-based organization. They've all stepped up in the work to make sure that homelessness is brief, rare, and non
And last but not least, I want to do a quick shout out to our very own Renee Browse, who has served 8 years. I didn't realize when I first started, we've had some long timers working in this field, supporting our work, and on this committee. We're gonna eventually in the spring, we're gonna talk later about term limits and all that, or but just wanted to express my personal, just appreciation for you, Renee. I know, various different capacities, but you stepping up as chair has really provided nice continuity for me. Thank you for your leadership, and we look forward to serving this community when you come off this committee in the spring. So thank you, Renee. We love that, everyone.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Narendra,
Yeah, hey, thank you for the update, Molly. The one question I had when the renovations are going on is any plans to rough in AC support? We talked about that a long time ago, especially for seniors who, as the weather gets bad, they may want to have ACs installed, but if we can make it easier for them by roughing that support in.
Sorry, Narendra, can you HCV, can you repeat that question?
I'm sorry.
Can you repeat that question, please?
The question was for about as the rehabilitation renovation work is going on these units, can we roughen AC support so that a room air conditioner can be installed easily?
Yes, air conditioning in our projects. Yeah, we can address that.
Yeah. We have air conditioning or some kind of air conditioning in all, I believe, of the projects under rehabilitation.
Yeah.
There's always a common area or a cooling area that's on site. All the new developments that we are embarking on now have air conditioning, and we're actually looking at putting in air conditioning, at least portable air conditioning in all of our own, you can call it Hawk owned properties, where we are either general partner or where we're directly owning it. There are a few buildings that do not have it currently because they were constructed many, many years ago. And I think we're in the process of looking at that. Because it's now sort of winter, we're not looking at buying air conditioning
Sure.
because it will just go into storage. But come in the spring, we're looking at putting in additional portables,
Okay,
because
thank you very much. Thank you.
not put in the PCAPs.
Thank you.
Was Heartwood specific, they already have.
Yes. That's right, and Parkwood already has it. And we're looking for the new buildings, any of the new projects we're looking at, it will all have air conditioning or some sort of air conditioning, whether it's portable or permanent.
Thank you.
And all of our senior properties have air conditioning.
Right. And the portables have become much more efficient in the last couple of years too, it seems.
Yeah.
And they're so big. They're getting smaller, but
Yeah, a
getting
little bit,
smaller.
yes.
New construction now in the state of Oregon and multifamily is now mandated to provide cooling.
Oh, really?
So,
Good point, that one.
Yeah, in new construction.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think my question was more about for the rehab units, right? Because we're
Sure.
tearing down the walls to do some rehabilitation work, older units, better to just rough it in, and so portable units can be installed later if necessary. Okay. I had one more request for you, Molly. I think you captured the history of how public housing from 1930s, where government was building everything, to where we are today with vouchers. If you were to look at the budget for 2025 and say, in a pie chart, simple, what is the breakdown between units owned versus vouchers? And what do you see 3 to 5 years out that pie chart changing to? That'll be just good to have as a backdrop to say, where the emphasis is for public housing.
that's a great suggestion as we look at what's the right type of interventions and strategies that are not just cost effective, but what work over a span of time, and what is our best
added value, and we have some more flexibility with having to move into work destination.
Yeah.
We have 244 public housing units, and we have 2,700 vouchers to kind of get a sense of that proportionality. That's a good, be good to do that in our dashboard. It's an overall, that could be an overall pie chart. I will say that historically, in the last 50 years, there's been more of a disinvestment in public housing, and there's been broader bipartisan support for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. You do see more of a steady stream, if you will, of vouchers. And then the work we do is the best of both worlds in some ways is the project basing of our Section 8 vouchers, which can lead to some stability in communities that that unit will always be equally affordable, but we want to make sure we're balancing that with enough choice with our household. So they're seeking.
And Molly, are the 2,700, that's what you said, vouchers?
Yep.
Are those downstream coming from HUD? Is that where, okay.
Yep.
And then Michael, I love this question. Do you have any idea what the dollar amount is? I mean, if each voucher is $5, then it's a number.
I'm gonna give you a lovely presentation that's probably gonna
Oh, good.
shine some light on
Oh,
the
good.
numbers on that today. So if you still have more questions after that.
I went from dumb question to unbelievably insightful,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You're just like, you're eating me out. Thank you so much. I'll give you the $5 for.
All
And
right. Any other
wonderful to look at that pie chart for 2025, moving forward, total people served as a result of that. So thank you. Yeah.
Great. Any other comments or questions for Molly? All right. If not, we're going on to the next piece of business, which is the 2025 elections. As you know from what has already been stated earlier, we will not be meeting in November or December, so we're doing the elections a little bit early. But we had a nomination submission for Melinda Bell as the chair and one nomination submission for Ryan Kane for vice chair. So what I would ask is that from the individuals that are in the space today, that we have a motion to nominate each position, and then we'll see if there's any other nominations from the floor. So is there a motion to nominate Melinda for the position of chair?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so the nomination for Melinda as chair has been moved and seconded. Melinda, do you accept the nomination?
I accept the nomination. Thank you guys so much.
Fantastic. Are there any further nominations for position of chair from the floor?
I would just like to say that I've been doing this. I came on this committee around 8 years ago, as a resident. I'm currently still a resident. And the things that I've learned here I've been able to take with me, not only for the current work that I do, but to share with others. I'm currently a housing navigator for New Narrative, and I see the homelessness every day. And I see the struggle also that people have when they get in housing and they can't maintain their housing, and what happens to them after that. So, yeah, fighting homelessness is one of the major reasons why I'm still on this committee and trying to keep myself from being homeless as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Melinda. So she's already shared a little bit about her interest in the position. I do want to make sure we've closed the process. So are there any further nominations for the position of chair? Hearing and seeing none, then I declare the nominations closed. Thanks, Melinda. Congratulations. We will now open the floor for the position of vice chair. Is there somebody that can make a motion to nominate Ryan Kane for the position of vice chair?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Melinda. Is there a second for the nomination?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Are there any further nominations for are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? And Ryan, do you accept the nomination?
I do accept, thank you.
All right, so we'll close that. And then Ryan, would you like to share a few words as to why you are interested in this position?
I look forward to working with you, Melinda. I wanted to participate in this level to learn a little bit more about how the group interacts with the county. And bring my thoughts on how the committee can help the county out and maybe adjust a few things so that we work better together. Moving forward, have more of those debates like we had last week. And I bring a little bit of experience from, essentially grew up in low-income housing and farm worker housing, before it was called farm worker housing. And below the poverty level. And now I work as an architect developing affordable housing so that people have equitable homes to live in, and the opportunities that I have growing up. So that's why I'm passionate. I'm here.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. All right, now we still have to make this official and need to vote by acclamation. So all those in favor of electing Melinda as the chair, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Congratulations, you're the official chair, Melinda.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Same process for Ryan. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Say nay. And the ayes have it. Again, congratulations, Ryan. Thank you. Looking forward to next year's leadership. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is staff liaison update. And I will pass it over to Banner.
Yes. Congrats to the new chairs. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I might have like a frog throat. Okay, so updates for y'all. So I think I mentioned this in the email that I sent out. We are being tasked from the county for the boards and commissions to now move to a new platform called iAgenda. So it should be way easy for y'all. We'll be using this new platform starting in January. So we hope to send out everything through one link, which is exciting. You'll get like minutes, meeting information all within a link. But this is a new process. So if there are issues or anything that comes up, please let me know. Open to questions or any feedback around that. We're having our luncheon, which is exciting. I know Molly kind of talked about this a little bit. We are excited. I think we have a tentative date. I can share, right? Okay, great. Thanks for sending out your responses for the poll. I think we're landing on December 16th, 11:30 to 1:30. We will send y'all save the date, so if you don't remember that now, don't worry about it. We're hoping to do it at the Washington Street Conference Center, which is really right across the street by the Hatfield Government Max Stop, which is really convenient. But yeah, we're excited to celebrate y'all, and you'll get to see some of the other work that's being done with like Solutions Council and our Resident Advisory Board and other subcommittees, which is really exciting. But yeah, we're excited to kind of close that off for the year. And then, like I said, in the past meeting, we are doing the housing forum, which Melissa will talk a little bit about in a little bit. But we are making sure that those RSVPs are getting sent. So if you haven't signed up already, please do so because it helps with like meal planning. So just an FYI there.
Can you repeat the date of the lunch? Sorry, I think
The luncheon,
Yeah,
December
lunch.
16th.
16.
Yes.
Monday, right?
Yes. And I mentioned the other meeting, we are recruiting for HAC members. I already got some good juicy applications. Thanks for those who have been submitting their recommendations or requests. the application period does end next week on the 29th. But you know, these are kind of rolling submissions, but ideally we would love to get folks sooner than later, just so we kind of get them prepared for the new year. So please, if you know anyone, specifically finance, urban or regional planner, and veteran representative, I think is really our focus. So please let me know if you have any questions. And lastly, I will say that we hope to focus on our bylaws in the new year. We have not updated those in many years. I think it's been like 7, 8, it's been a while. So we feel like it's important to kind of look at those, get those updated. So that's gonna be a process we start in the new year. So yeah, start kind of putting your, preparing yourself for that, that we hope to reflect on in the new year. So excited about that. And I did want to mention one correction on our packet, which Ryan so happily mentioned to me. It's very minor, but it says for our meeting for today, where we have listed all our meetings, it says Friday. It's obviously Thursday. Thursday, October 24th. So gonna make that correction and when we send out information for minutes and all that. So just wanted to flag that. I think that's it.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Any questions or comments for Beaneth? All right, moving on then to the next item, which is ongoing business. I will pass that over to Melissa. I guess you're going to talk about housing forum.
Yeah, good morning. Hi, everyone. I'm also getting over germs, but less space from my germs than BNF, so I'm keeping them home. You're welcome. Happy school year, everyone. So I am just providing an update on the housing forum. I think all of you are familiar with our housing forum. It's our annual event where we bring together people in the community to talk about different topics related to housing. We are scheduled for Friday, November 22nd from 9 a.m. to noon at the Wingspan Event Center. Same location as last year. That's out in Hillsborough again. This year, we're fully integrating our partner advisory body from the homeless services side, the Solutions Council. So that's really exciting. We've invited nearly 300 partners and elected officials from the community. And we're hoping to have about 100 attendees at the event. So kind of turning it up a bit. I think it'll be great. We're planning for 2 panels this year. The first is focused on behavioral health and housing. So we'll be discussing promising ideas and best practices in integrating behavioral health and housing and what's on the horizon. Jess Larson is moderating that panel, and we've invited Jeremiah Rigsby from CARE Oregon, Yoni Khan from Northwest Pilot Project, and Sean Hubert from Central City Concern, as well as Senator Kate Lieber, who represents the 14th District. That includes Beaverton and Aloha, and she's shown a really strong interest in this topic, so it's really exciting to have her on board for that. Our second panel is focused on the preservation of affordable housing. Lisa Varon will moderate that panel, and we've invited Michael Parkhurst from OHCS, Ryan Fisher from Neighborhood Partnerships, and Sean Clark from Bridge Housing. And for that panel, we are once again happy to welcome Senator Casey Jama, Chair of the Senate Committee on Housing and Development. He joined us last year, and we're really excited that he's coming again this year. In addition to the panels, we're planning for a slightly longer mid-morning break to operate as kind of a networking opportunity for folks, since we'll have so many people in the room. So that'll be great. But just overall, we're excited for another great event this year. I hope all of you can plan to attend. I'm really excited to have both of our committees in the room. And like Bianna said, if you haven't already, please take a moment to RSVP. We can send out that link again to you all so that you have it at the top of your inbox. Just help us keep count on how much coffee we need. Any questions about the event? No? Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. And now I'll pass it over to Michael Clark, our finance director, to provide a quarterly update.
Thank you. Thanks, Bianna, for getting the slides up for us. So this is the fourth quarter, so this is through the end of the last fiscal year. We have the July to June fiscal year, so this is June 2024. And I think Bruce, you'd asked last time for a summary slide on revenue sources.
Awesome.
So here we have it with our main program areas, our housing choice voucher, public housing, housing development, and affordable housing, and then all the different types of sources of funding that we have that flow through the housing authority in each of those 4 areas. So as you can see, housing choice voucher is the largest source. It's about 47 million. Liz is going to talk more about housing choice vouchers later. And then in comparison to that, looking at public housing, it's one of our next largest areas for HUD funding. If you look at capital and operating grants there. And then we have some tenant revenue. And then for our housing development, we've had a lot of funding in the past from the Metro Affordable Housing Bond. And then we have developer fees that are another main source of revenue that are coming in there. And then for our affordable housing portfolio, the main source of funding there is the tenant revenues. So I'll pause for a minute so can soak in. Are there any questions?
Yeah, that's hopefully it wasn't a lot of work for you, but super helpful.
Well, we've been working through fiscal year end, and so
Yeah.
we had these numbers, so we were able to just pivot and put them in a table.
Perhaps a stupid question. Are you saying when you have the housing development column, that's just the development of affordable housing, or is it all sorts of housing that you're talking about in that development column?
So that would be any of our affordable housing and any type of partnerships, anything that the affordable housing are the properties that we own as the housing authority.
Okay.
Versus what's in the
Versus what's in the
pipeline
pipe.
is in the development
Okay.
section.
That-
Yeah.
I thought,
It's a
but
good
it's helpful.
Yeah,
yeah.
Thank you.
And Michael, that doesn't include, does that, or I guess the question, does it include the pass-through? Because the county serves as a pass-through for other projects. But these are just count housing authority projects.
This
right?
is just the housing authority. It's nothing to do with
Yeah, this is very small.
the county housing services department side.
The bonds went for the house, the county side,
They did.
I see, they did not go
through
through the housing
county,
authority.
but-
Ah, got it.
as a financing.
Understood, yeah, okay.
So it is a pass-through then there, yeah.
Okay,
Or it
makes
comes
sense.
from the department side over on
I
to the
understand,
housing
okay,
authority
yeah.
side they use, thanks.
Well, it's into their projects, that's what we do.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it's
That's
in
what I was
there.
thinking. I know one project, I mean, that's not even one project.
Yeah.
Michael, just one question then. Would that then foot with, on page 8 of the packet, it's rent assistance, and that's units, right? So there's a total amount of units on the packet, and that's how much dollars it takes for the units on page 8? Is that a
So
good
that would be
correlation?
all of our housing assistance payments for all of those vouchers.
Okay,
For the year.
so this many units is that many dollars.
So you could take that dollar, it's not an equal comparison.
Right.
The different programs are involved there and
And
but you
there
can get a
on
ballpark.
right, and on page 8, it does include like the top part, which is our federal programs or HUD programs, and the bottom part. So if you're looking at that total,
Right.
including our homeless services, which is not included in this.
Got it.
So just that top HUD funded is coming through the housing authority, yes, in connection.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're just trying to directionally going this many units, this much dollars, because the folks that I talk to in the community that are interested or whatever, I'm getting a little bit more literate on the funnels. So super helpful. Thanks.
To be technically correct, if I were you, I'd say units plus vouchers.
Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yep.
Narinder?
That's fine.
Yeah, Michael, clarification question, is transitional housing included in any of those columns or is that separate?
The transitional housing would be included within the affordable housing area.
Actually,
Okay.
I don't believe transitional, we don't have any transition housing.
But if we had any, it would roll up in there.
And those small ones.
They're not fully, they're not occupied right now, but if they were, they would roll up into the affordable bucket.
If we own-
According
if we
to
own them,
our fund structure, yes.
Okay,
Does
thank you.
that help?
Any other questions? Good questions. Okay. We'll move on. So here's the summary slide. So as you can see, actual revenues were about 4.6 million higher than budgeted. And this is primarily due to the developer fees and Quatama Partnerships waterfall payments. Higher than expected port and housing assistance payments that were earned, and also the fraud recovery, that area. And then our tenant revenue at Woodspring. And actual expenditures were also higher by 5.9 million than budgeted, and this was due to, as I mentioned in previous updates, the Woodspring debt interest, Heartwood Commons depreciation, our housing assistance payments, and then some major repairs that we've had to do from fire and sinkholes and floods at a few of the properties that weren't anticipated. So overall expenditures are trending higher, and that's due to our housing assistance payments. The repairs that I mentioned at specific properties, I have the details if anyone wants to know that. Our admin and overhead expenses associated with all of our other costs. And the Woodspring apartment debt was not budgeted. So that's a reflection there. And then the Heartwood Commons depreciation was not included in the budget for that year. Okay. Move on to the next slide unless there's questions.
Is the net income then stripped into retained earnings, or is it just operating to offset operating expenses you roll into the next year?
So what it does is it ends up actually into a fund balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
But really then pays bills, operating capital versus
So we have
reserve
revenue,
fund.
yeah, and whatever we have remaining rolls over into the next year as part of the fund balance. Similar to retained earnings.
Sort of. right?
Sort of,
Okay,
yeah. Okay, Housing Choice Voucher Program. So actual revenues were 2.2 million higher than budgeted, and this is primarily due to higher than expected port and housing assistance payments earned and fraud recovery. And actual expenditures were also higher by 1.5 million than budgeted, and this is due to housing assistance payments and associated materials, services, and contracts. So if we're looking at this one, it's pretty close to break even.
That's better than you reported earlier, right?
Yeah.
It's my smiling.
Yeah. Yeah. Wish all of our areas were the same, but we'll talk about some more here. Okay, so next one, public housing. So actual revenues here were 65,000 less than budgeted, primarily due to less HUD operating funds received. And a portion of the calendar year 2024 HUD capital grant funds are to be expended later in June 2024, after June 2024. So we're going to see it in the Q1 report for this current fiscal year. I'm back with that in January. And then actual expenditures were 247,000 higher than budgeted. And that was due to adding a staff position throughout the year. And then we had some overhead expenses that were associated with that too. And so the lighter shaded area that's a little bit higher, that's the depreciation expense. So we were pretty close on this one. Just a little over the top when you add in the depreciation expense. Then next program's development. This one looks really good. So actual revenues were 1.9 million more than budgeted, and that's primarily due to those developer fees and then the Quatama Partnerships waterfall payments. And then actual expenditures were 1.3 million less than budgeted. And we had payroll vacancy savings. We had less overhead expenses. And we also had the startup of the Foster Youth Independence Program that was included in this area.
What's a developer fee, like permits and that kind of stuff?
You want to take that one?
Developer fees is what we charge when we do a project.
Yeah.
It's because affordable housing, we don't make money on the rental. It's what covers for any developer is essentially their profit on a transaction.
It's the risk involved, like payment for the risk involved essentially.
Got it.
So for example, in some of our projects, especially for example, on the risk we take with interest, construction costs. and all
Sure.
that. So that's what essentially for developers across the affordable housing spectrum, that's what pays for those.
It's built in just like if we're a capital expense.
Yeah.
It's not actually a capital expense, but in the budget, it's always like that, you know?
Interesting.
Then our last one's the affordable housing program. This one's not as pretty. So actual revenues were 595,000 more than budgeted, and that's primarily due to our Woodspring tenant revenues. And then actual expenditures were 5.4 million higher than budgeted, and that's due to major repairs. We had fire at Aloha Park, we had sinkholes at Kayburn, we had floods at the ridge of Bull Mountain, Amberwood, Heartwood Commons, Valkyrie, and Holly Tree. And so those are unanticipated costs, of course. And then our Woodspring debt interest, as I mentioned, wasn't in the original budget, and our Heartwood Commons depreciation wasn't budgeted there too. So as you can see, it's the depreciation expense, the lighter shaded portion that is going above.
Did your insurance rates go up because of all those claims?
Yeah, it went up significantly. As a matter of fact, our insurance rates right now, a lot of the affordable housing partners, we've also spoken with, we're finding that our units or projects are being dropped. And it's hard to find insurance. It's, I think across the board, it went up by about
29%.
precise number. And we are actually, that 29% is probably on the low side. We've heard other partners who say that there's double.
Sure. Friend and every time.
And one thing we discussed was that the development fee is what is currently subsidizing the lack of income from the unit. So you have to keep developing to pay for the rehab and maintenance of the existing. And that's one thing I'd be interested to dive into in the next.
Yeah, and I
Next
think
year.
one of the other things we would like to have a better handle on is also making sure that we have sufficient reserves, especially for the capital costs for maintenance. A sinkhole you can't really plan for,
Right.
it would be nice. And our, unfortunately, our stock is pretty low.
And that's why these are all in the process of being converted into partnerships too, so that will change. So but yeah, insurance and which are anomalies right now.
And we will be looking at, what do you do with a very old portfolio, some of which is not efficiently designed. As we're noticing in our existing portfolio that we have, some of these you can peter along for a little bit, but it can't, in the long run, continue as it is. It's just not really going to be, the cost of continuous repair is going to be too much.
We had 2 sinkholes on the properties too. We took care of one and then turned around and then there was another one.
Under units or like in the parking area or
In the parking and grounds.
grounds?
The other problems, the flooding and the fires, are those resident caused or are they?
The fire was resident caused. Yeah. Burners on.
Yeah.
Well, and per Jill's comment, like we talked before, one-time non-recurring expense that happens every year. Right, it's a different thing. But usually it's, in any budget, that's the delta, right?
Most fit more, longer term developers, and this is something we have to develop too, is trying to create your own, essentially your own unrestricted capital reserve.
Right. Yeah, no, I said
Corpus
reserve,
level,
yeah.
Because every partnership has a setup, capital reserves, but
Right.
it's only for that partnership. And to your point,
I can't plan,
right?
we can't plan when that sinkhole is gonna happen
Right.
across the board, but having something that's a portfolio wide.
Yeah. And next year won't be a sinkhole, it'll be a meteor.
Contingency
Right.
fund. Yeah.
Right?
Famine.
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it'll always be there, right? And it always devastates budgets.
And then the next one's just a summary. A snapshot. So as we can see overall with the operating, for actuals for 23-24 in the shaded column, we're still hitting around 5 million there. And then when you add in the debt and the depreciation and amortization expense, then we had a net loss of about 700,000 there.
Pretty close though.
Yeah, we came
Right,
very
that
close.
big revenue.
I think it was a little bit more optimistic as we've gone through from Q3 to Q4. Are there any questions? So January, I'll come back and bring Q1.
All right.
Thank
Any
you.
Any further questions? Thank you for the report. I am very appreciative of that first slide as well. That was nice information. Thank you for doing that. We do not have any new business this time, so we'll move on to department updates, which we received in the packet. I know today we're hearing from Liz Morris about rental assistance. Liz, you want to take it away?
Absolutely, thank you. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about the rental assistance division, but specifically we're going to talk about the voucher programs. And I do want to give some like baseline clarity because you're going to see some numbers and discussions that we just had. So all the financial stuff was our fiscal year. A lot of the numbers and the stuff that I'm going to be representing is annual year because that's how HUD works when it comes to our funding. So if you're like, wait, why doesn't it match? Also, the way that we're doing our buckets. So again, that big bucket had our admin fee as well as our HAP expenditure in all of our vouchers. I'm going to be talking more specifically and the slides will show, pulling them up. We'll show what I am specifically talking about, which is our housing choice voucher annual contributions contract, which includes our housing choice vouchers, DASH and FYI ownership. We also have like a mainstream bucket and an emergency housing bucket because they're coming from different funding. So that's why it's very complex. I'm going to try to give as much overview to bring you all in on a explaining enough, hopefully, that you're like, what am I looking at? But also not going to, because if we want to sit for 2 hours and I can kind of explain like the weeds of it, that would take it minimally that much to do. So I'm hopefully we'll be able to toe the line for both, but giving some context as to why things are the way they are, and then also like how that impacts us. So that's my goal for this.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll go ahead and start with our, so we want to talk about the current funding that we have for our federal vouchers and like, what does this mean for the housing authority? And so with our housing choice voucher, we're gained 50 years, really excited about that. Excited to spend the last 17 years of my professional life in this world and vouchers specifically. And it is one of the biggest program that HUD has that is serving people across the over 3,000 housing authorities countrywide. So the funding for our vouchers is from appropriations coming by Congress and annual budgets that come through. It gets allocated around to all the different housing authorities. So this is so many different factors based on it. It's based on like, what is our total amount of contract that we're allowed to have, but what do we actually lease of that contract? And then there's inflation and other factors that kind of come into it. So it has multiple layers to it as well as those local needs. And then like I said, there's additional 30 notices that come out from HUD every year, if not more than that, of there's this funding opportunity there, this one doesn't apply or this one does. And so we're constantly monitoring. Next slide, please. So the funding is actually can vary, right? And the fluctuation from year to year, it does impact how we're able to serve what our household makeup looks like. So we receive that HAP funding, the Housing Assistance Payment funding for that subsidy, as well as the administrative funding that kind of comes in. So we're looking at a couple of those for that overall budget. But we have restrictions on, our HAP funds can only be spent for HAP funds, so the cost of the rent subsidy for people. So some of these, it's the stability funding needs that we're finding, so being able to maintain the voucher programs and additional families it's just something that we're having to constantly monitor. That increased demand that we're finding that folks are needing the assistance and the administrative challenges. In addition to just kind of maintaining a voucher program, regulations are consistently changing. The way that we do inspections, the way that they're modernizing their systems, there's a lot of requirements. And then we have our own with MTW that we're like, hey, we can make this work better for our locality. So there's like all of these different factors that kind of come in. Our 400-page admin plan is published on our website if you ever want to go really deep down into the voucher program and hope to enjoy that like reading.
Pretty good about.
Yes. Next slide, please. So let's talk about our HAWC, Housing Authority. So this is our budget and leasing overview. And so we currently are leasing, and this is where the 2,700 number that Molly was talking was straight HCD. So our ACC, or annual contributions contract, includes HCD, VASH, homeownership, and foster youth independence. So that's where these numbers are not going to align with the other numbers that you've heard today, really do. Yeah, so currently for our ACC, we are leasing 2,875. So this also includes our project-based vouchers. So that's kind of under that bucket as well. So our overall utilization is 94.28%. We are meeting goals. Like HUD does have like a newer goal. They want all housing authorities to be at 98%, but they have to show us the money in order for us to be able to meet that goal. We're kind of, the standard has been, as long as you're above 90%, you're doing well. And that is like kind of the goal. So our contract has 3,063 vouchers. And then if you looked at page 8, as Bruce noted, that if you add in the emergency housing vouchers, which was part of the affordable housing, or not here is that, what was the second one? It came from ARPA, I believe. And then our mainstream vouchers, our total all in is getting close to 3,360. 31. So there's about 300 more vouchers that we're administering. And then the department is also administering all our local regional programs too. So we're spending about 104% of that annual budget authority for our vouchers that we have. And our average unit costs, this is our driving factor of why it's being impacted. For us, it's $1,196. So very close to $1,200. We are still leading #1 in Oregon as the most expensive housing authority for unit cost.
But let's contrast that or compare that to the fact that we are the most expensive county providers.
Yeah, right.
Right, yeah, we are. Yeah.
Will that number drop as you?
Correct, and Clackamas. Clackamas is the most expensive for home values, because it includes like Oswego, but we are renters.
Will that, are you expecting that average per unit cost to go down once you sell the homes that are difficult to maintain?
This public housing is not in this at all. So this is straight vouchers. Yeah. Our public housing portfolio is a different funding source.
It's all right, I'm
No, you're good.
I'm behind, but I'm catching up.
No.
Okay.
But how this does tie in is the tenant protection vouchers. So there is a connection. So once we do sell those units, we will get 59 of those that will come into our overall ACC, because we're then able to give those folks who were not able to buy their homes a protection voucher, so they can utilize it like the housing choice. It is the housing choice voucher in the community that also increases our overall contract number. So there's a little bit of tying in there, but it's not quite yet.
Got it.
Next slide.
A question on that.
Oh,
Narendra has a question.
okay.
And as you mentioned, the cost is lower in Clackamas County. Do you know the reasons why and what or how much does property taxes impact the eventual affordability at a county level?
I think it's because, well, our voucher program is primarily for private market landlords. We do have a lot of affordable housing places where people are renting affordable housing, but a huge amount of them is to be able to rent to private landlords. And so if their property taxes are higher, they're increasing their rent portion, then that's going, you know, that's why our rent costs are so high. And then that impacts how much subsidy, because again, as Molly had mentioned at the beginning, the income for what our participants are finding is not meeting with the limit, so. And just as, yeah, second largest county, just having some really high expense areas, the urban growth boundaries large. That is, I don't know if there's probably other factors that we can see. Yeah.
Well, I think where I was leading to was
Yes.
if rental costs are going up from an affordability point of view, and if the property tax portion of it is a higher component for the private rental market, what can the county do to offset that so that you know, rents can be more affordable, right?
That by providing the subsidy, because they're creating a rent amount that covers all of their operating expenses, which includes property taxes.
Okay.
Property tax.
So it's really money rotating from the left pocket to the right pocket.
Yep, it's all interconnected.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question about, I know that HUD is backing, they've been backing out of the funding of developing affordable housing for a long time. Are they creating more of these choice vouchers every year, or are they backing out of that as well?
Last year was probably the first year that they did just grant new straight housing choice vouchers to housing authorities that were not special purpose vouchers, the VASH mainstream emergency housing. And that is a continued conversation that we're hearing from HUD, is that they are trying to increase that. Is just, it depends on Congress and where they're wanting to put in the money. I don't think it's not decreasing, it's just that it is dependent on this.
That's my concern is there potential, like they're giving you 3,000 vouchers in 4 years, do you suddenly only get 1,500, or are those guaranteed for their life?
As much as you can guarantee anything.
Yeah.
The appropriations have from a historical perspective, has been first and foremost maintaining the base level of vouchers. And that's why you get bipartisan support, because it's promoting private sector, generally landlords, and also you have existing residents in there. So a lot of what you see in the HUD budget is more and more of the budget is being eaten up by renewals and maintaining those existing contracts with either multifamily Section 8 or housing choice vouchers. It's public housing where we get the more volatility, because there's two different pots, and public housing has its own, issues across the country. Different housing authorities have done it differently. And so we have a capital grant and an operating grant that is just a much harder program for us to finish. Bruce is mulling, you're about to ask them there. They're good, they're good.
Under the scope of, I'll formulate a question, then ask it.
Okay. So this is just a different kind of way to look at what we have with our overall, all of our voucher programs. And so that does include that with that 70%, almost 70% of them are housing choice vouchers. We have a 16% of our special purpose vouchers. So, and those are usually have a component of people who are experiencing homelessness to qualify as eligibility point, our veteran status or non-elderly disabled are aiding on foster care. And then we have project-based 14% of our portfolio. And this is of the housing choice voucher, and we do have some project-based dash. So that just kind of gives you an idea of like what our makeup looks like of our 3,000, like over 3,000. So this is some historic knowledge, so voucher leasing and budget utilization. So our black line there is how much we've utilized of that budget and then how many vouchers we're leasing. And over since 2015, so this gives almost a 10-year snapshot. And showing how the voucher program has grown, how we have been able to lease more people. But we have definitely in the last year, and really hit that point where we're overutilizing our budget because of the vouchers that we have on hand. Next slide. And this snapshot right here is our 2024 year-to-date expenditure, what we're anticipating at the end of the year. So we, and our total reserves is at the number, the 2 million at the bottom is what we had at the end of 2023. But we are exceeding that at the end of it, projected at the end of 2024. I know, these are snapshots, it's gonna come together, Okay, next slide. So as we've kind of, again, these are just kind of different visuals that might help you as you're kind of looking at where we've kind of spent our budget utilization year to year. And a lot of this is driven by that per unit cost. So we are in 2023 and 2024, kind of exceeded that 100%. So we have eaten up those reserves that we have. All right, next slide.
Real quick, Liz,
Yes.
what are the reserves for? Is it for a shortfall of the vouchers, $100, my rent's $200 and we subsequently, so that was my question. What's the reserve for?
The reserves are for, yes, exactly that. So like as we, if the funding that we get do not meet the funding, or the funding that goes out and to help with our shortfall, that is exactly where we are supposed to go into before HUD then says, it looks like we need more money. And so.
Because they're vouchers, we're not improving the physical structure,
Right.
we're improving cash flow for people trying to make.
Yeah.
Got it.
Actually, a quick list of all, if you have a lot in reserves, does HUD look at that and say, oh gee, you don't need,
Right, that was.
Yes.
you don't need more funding this year because you have a lot in reserves?
Yes.
Yeah.
They actually, yeah. And this last year has been really historic. So, at one point, over half of the housing authorities in the country were in shortfall. And then they were able, like now they're down to about like 250, I think, or less than 500, but like the ones that are really bad. There are housing authorities that their voucher utilization was under 90%, but then they had like 10 million in reserves, or some of them even more. A lot of our MTW agencies had about a third of the entire reserves for the country, because they had capital projects. They've had 30 years of being an MTW agency as a legacy agency versus the new cohorts. So that's where it's a little bit different, like a Home Board, Seattle Housing Authority, King County Housing Authority. But HUD did recapture reserve from housing authorities. It was a very, a lot of housing authorities are like, ouch. Exactly. So, and because there's so many housing authorities that did not have enough to cover the costs. I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do they take my, I don't, you know what?
But so isn't one takeaway, you really wanna have high utilization? I mean, obviously it helps people,
Yeah.
so that's the purpose, but also for them.
Yeah, and in very, and being able to identify like what your plan is, like what your reserve like plan is, so then if there is like, oh, it's because we just weren't able to utilize, and we know we had pandemic, we had other things that have factored in the cost, just the change in the vitality of like renting for participants, and just it's a new way of having to voucher.
And sorry, I'm trying to be mindful of time though. So our magic really in working with HUD is there's different voucher programs coming from HUD and we know what our target need is, ABC. Does HUD at times say, no more A vouchers, and we know that, oh, that's the need here, right? Our pie chart is way, we need A vouchers, not C vouchers. Is that part of the dance with HUD to make sure the vouchers align with the needs that you've identified kind of in the pie chart?
It is, I think, to give you just a little bit more makeup around HUD, and there's about 3 big industry groups. CLAPA, which is the Council of Large Public Housing Authorities, NARO, which is the National Housing and Real Estate Development and Housing Authority, one, and FADA, which I can't remember what that one is, I'm sorry. Those help lobby and work with the housing authorities. We're members of CLAPA and of the MTW Collaborative as well as NARO. So in that, we also have those meetings to talk about what is the need for us and for other housing authorities. We also communicate with our regional HUD office, and then we'll go to lobby if needed to talk about the needs. So there is that conversation.
So they're an
like,
intermediary of sorts?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they help, the industry groups really do help. Hearing what's the boots on the ground are expressing as the needs for their communities, and HUD's actually, I don't know, HUD is listening, like over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot more engagement, a lot more of asking of like what the housing authorities needs and having those conversations.
Got it. Sorry to take you offline.
I had a question about advocacy too, you know, when you're talking about lobbying. I'm a little unclear. I know there's policies in place that allow tenants to use their vouchers as income when they're applying for units through privately owned organizations. Is that a state law?
State by state, of how they define source of income as a protected class. So we expanded that definition as part of, protected classes, and now we how people are treated when they apply for certain things. And
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I hear that in Multnomah County, but I didn't know if that was statewide, so we don't need to. Have to do here.
It is luckily that the Oregon state ordinance, and it's not every state, unfortunately, so some places do have a lot more hardship with renters being told, I don't accept the voucher. Straight out.
Governor Tech championed that about 10 years ago.
So speaking of shortfall, queuing me up, I love it. So it occurs when we have less than 3 months of operating reserves that are gonna happen, and to prevent this, we don't want to terminate people who are on the program, so there's a lot of different actions that housing authorities have to do. Next slide. Some factors that can really lead to this is there's this 2-year tool that HUD has that we work with our local office and we run ourselves. Over leasing can be a reason, excessive utility allowance. My fancy Nancy highlight is literally showing this is our primary reason that we are at concern, is our per unit cost is really just driving that continuous thing. We're monitoring everything else. We're being mindful of our utilization. We're being mindful of our utility allowance and all that. Not that, and we're constantly monitoring all of it, but that is the one factor we can't really change, unfortunately. The per unit cost is just, it's a driving force. So it's not like we can just stop having rent increases from landlords. Next slide, please. So this is another historic kind of mapping of that trajectory over the last 10 years. The 2015, 650, there are still jurisdictions in Oregon that have a per unit cost that are in the 600s and 700s. Like, yeah, I think Multnomah is just barely 1,000, Clackamas is barely 1,100. And there might be like, Bend might be a more expensive city, but like the jurisdiction of the housing authority, it's gonna be a little bit different. Next slide. So for the eligibilities for shortfall, we just, again, that less than 3 months, the funding that the housing authority receives, the difference between their monthly operating reserves and that 3 months reserves, and then they prioritize based off not having enough funding. So that's kind of like what happens when housing authorities are entering in that shortfall activity. Next slide, please. So technically, Hawk was in shortfall for 2 months in 2024. Again, because we monitor that 2-year tool, we're having the conversations, we knew months and even a year before we were getting to that, we had already put in a lot of stop measures. So like, what can we do to kind of like shore down everything that we could, so it didn't keep going, higher and higher. So we met with the HUD and the shortfall office with HUD. We were able to ask other housing authorities that were administering our vouchers in their jurisdiction, which we have to then pay an admin fee for to absorb those vouchers. We did have some housing authorities that were able to absorb. And so then we're not paying out that subsidy as well as that admin cost. So that really helped. We started billing other housing authorities when we had people who had a voucher here and they decided they wanted to port out. And now we are getting those admin fees coming back, so we're gonna keep seeing that grow. We weren't issuing any new vouchers off of our housing choice voucher wait list. So there's still vouchers going out our doors. We're still seeing people in leased up, but not off of our housing choice voucher wait list. And we were not issued any shortfall funding because we were naturally able to get out of shortfall in that time period.
So we had a shortfall.
Yes.
I just want to ask if people know what portability means, because that might be something to clarify for the group.
I think I do.
So the exciting thing is housing choice, right? And that's what HUD says. So if you have a housing choice voucher, you can port your voucher to any housing authority in the country. Depending on funding, some housing authorities might have limitations on that, because like if we don't have enough money to pay for it, and that housing authority is what they call absorbing or billing. So absorbing, they're just gonna take that voucher and it's gonna say one less lease up for us, and it's gonna go into their lease up pool. If they're billing, we're gonna still count them as our lease up, but we're gonna get charged $90 a month for them to administer that voucher, because they're gonna do the inspection, they're gonna do the recertification, they're gonna pay out the subsidy, and then they let us know we pay the subsidy and then that fee to them each month. Well, some jurisdictions, it's no big deal because they're per unit costs. If they're billing, it's like so much less than ours that it's fine. But if they want to like port to Los Angeles or New York and it's way more expensive, if we are in that funding concerns, we might say, sorry, we can only let you port someplace that is billing. So even though it is an opportunity for a lot, there can still be some restrictions where housing authorities have to say, no, we can't let you port out to that. There are some exceptions for VAWA, for domestic violence, and for accommodations, accessibility needs. So if somebody's requesting reasonable accommodation, there's always that opportunity for people to address. Yes. So here's kind of our year-end projection for 2024, and then what we're projecting in 2025 based on that, and based on what we are expected to be leasing up. So our UMLs, so that unit monthly, so we get paid only for what we've leased up. So even though we're allowed 3,000, we're not getting paid that 3,000. We're only getting paid for the 2,800, whatever we had leased up in the end of the month. And that's what that kind of like continually finance kind of comes out of it. And so it's compared to that unit month availability. So we're that 93, and then projected, we're not doing huge lease up, so we're not projecting that it's going to really change that much. Our percentage of HAP expense though, right now, because we're out of shortfall, we're like 99.1%, like we're really right at to the top of it. And we're projected just to go slightly over that to 101%, almost 102% in 2025. And that's as of right now, right? Because this is changing like month to month. If I pull these numbers tomorrow, it's going to even like change slightly. So essentially, we're projected by the end of 2025 to be 772,000 in shortfall. So we might by next July, August, September have to have the same conversation. This could change if there's more funding opportunities come in. If we, you know, like, per unit cost goes down and other things like that. So we'll continue to monitor, and that's why we're just gonna continue to monitor and continue to keep some of these actions that we have already in place. So next slide, please. Again, just some of these historical contexts, just to kind of give you an idea. So that green line is the units month available. So that's kind of just that contract amount that we've had. The units month leads is that black line, and then percentage of that utilization. So see mapped out in different ways for visualization. Next slide. So with 2025, our current projection, and like, what does this mean, is that we are projected, like I said, to go into shortfall. So it is, if we do, then, and we are in it, then it's possibility we'll get funding to match that too. It's not like the goal HUD has is not to have to terminate anybody off the program or anything like that. That is like the 18th step if it ever has to happen. And that's usually if it's like months and years, like in problems. So we are doing everything that we can do. So there's not going to be an increase to our voucher payment standard as well. So we might get some frustrations from our landlord partners around this, because the FMRs, let's look at a little voucher payment standards, which is that maximum subsidy per unit that we can pay per household, is based off of the area fair market rents. And we are required for those to be between 90% and 110%. We have an affordable market voucher payment standard because of MTW and a market rate payment standard because of MTW. The percentage of change was in the FMRs decreased actually. So we are going to just keep our payment standards the same because our fair market rents we saw went down just slightly in our area, which I know everybody loved. But this is so there's not going to be a lot of change for our participants as far as the ability to then use a higher rent unit. So as that comes, we're not seeing our participants having a problem leasing up. We can't decrease our payment standard because we have to give everybody a year's notice of we're decreasing it. And the reason we're not doing that is because it's such a small amount that by the time that we did that and gave a year's notice, the next year's FMRs are going to come out and then we don't know, and we might have to just turn around and increase them. And so that we put everybody through this, like, I'm getting less voucher. If it was a huge amount, we would be a different conversation and we'd have that kind of engagement and thinking what is the best for us to do. We'll continue to monitor if that's something that we have to do, but that is kind of where we are with payment standards. We're not going to be issuing any new vouchers off the Housing Choice Voucher waitlist unless, again, we see some changes come in. It's like if we get more voucher awards, if we have a change. So we're going to see that waitlist that opened in 2021 stay stagnant for a while, unfortunately.
And that's because you take a loss for every voucher that you hand out, so you keep.
And I do have a slide a little bit later that talks about like our attrition, and we're just not seeing a lot of people come off a program. They're staying, like, so usually you would be able to then maybe like, oh, well, we had, 200 exits, so maybe you're only filling 50 of those. So we're still seeing some movement. We're not seeing hardly any people truly exit our program at that attrition rate. So
And that's a wages conversation, right?
Pardon?
That's a wages conversation,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Their wages aren't increasing enough
Yep.
to ever come on.
Yeah.
When you look back historically at some of those lovely graphs you're producing, has there been in the past a lot of people coming off of voucher? Okay.
Yeah, I've always sort of natural attrition, but
Okay, you're right.
we're in a new era.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question. So you mentioned the fair market rents. Is that determined metro-wide?
It's determined by HUD and our jurisdiction is the metro.
So if we're the highest rent county, we get squeezed more, right? Because Clackamas and Multnomah aren't going up as much, or maybe even going down. HUD says, oh, fair market rent for Metro Portland, but we're actually higher.
Right.
Yeah. And we are working with other housing authorities to do studies. Because we do want to say like, hey, this isn't, yes, but we're not seeing this is what our true is. So there is a third party study that's happening, so that also could change. And that's why we're continually monitoring, because we don't know like these rollout impacts that do kind of come in different parts of the year. We have project-based commitments that we have to lease up, so that's also another reason. We're just gonna make sure that those attritions we're filling, but then any new projects that are coming online in the next year that we have those planned for as well, because the commitment is obviously really important that for the project as well as it's baked into our kind of planning. And we'll continue to always, and we've done this, but we will always continue to do this, explore the new funding opportunities that come and how we can continue to leverage our MTW status to see if there's any other ways for us to kind of monitor or change that. Again, any of those changes usually takes time to develop and then submit the waiver to HUD and then approval. So it's not like it's a cruise ship turning, you know, it takes a long time for it to actually turn. Next slide. So we'll just do that budget planning, monitoring legislation that comes out. We'll continue to collaborate with our stakeholders and just make sure that we have that financial sustainability. So, yeah, next slide. So this is our new admission trends. If you can see the green, that is for non-homeless admissions, and for black is our homeless admissions. So the reason to highlight that specifically is because most likely as the black number of homeless admission, that's because those are our special voucher programs, which we keep getting new awards for. We're keep being able to lease people up off those programs. And then our non-homeless admissions are those are green. So that is where we're kind of like seeing that change. It is not, I mean, this is more of a month by month kind of baseline. So overall, it's just not like a huge amount coming up. Next slide. And sorry, this one's really small. That end of participation, that annual attrition rate, the two different ways to kind of look at it. So we did have over the last couple of years, we're seeing you know, about some high levels, and usually sometimes that's just cleanup, right? Where it's just like, oh wait, this person did graduate, or as we're changing program requirements or anything like that. But we're averaging more recently about 5 or less per month people coming up.
Are the homeless admissions I mean, literally, they were homeless? I mean, is that?
There's, depending on the program, some of them do not have to have the literal homeless definition. It could be HUD's definition of homelessness, which could be chronically homeless or experiencing that, or having coming out of transitional housing. So it's not necessarily unsheltered. So, but it is meeting HUD's definition.
Got it, thanks.
And it matters because they get different vouchers.
Different voucher eligibility, yeah. So last year we were able to we purged our 2021 wait list. At the same time, we also solicited people who are on that our current wait list, which we're required to see if they're eligible for a mainstream voucher. So that's that non-elderly between 18 and 61 disabled homeless households. And we were able to pull about and issue about 100 vouchers for that. Not all of those are leasing out, but we were able to see some movement on that on our HCV wait list, because we had a source we were able to say, hey, let's see if we can serve any bids. And we're required to do that before we open it up to our Community Connect coordinated entry system to then try to fill the rest of our mainstream vouchers. Okay. So that's kind of like more or less the end. I do have a couple more slides like later, just 2 more, just for when it's shared out. If you want to see some more historic, talking about like our monthly vouchers on the street that are shopping for units, and then our unit leasing percentages. If again, these contexts of historical charts, again, they can be interesting, but also depends on what you're interested in kind of drilling down. So in the end, we're okay. I mean, I know, sure, like obviously the goal is for us to truly just be right at where we have just a tiny bit of reserves because of the things that might happen, but we're not like, and we're hitting our budget authority and we're hitting our lease up. So we're sitting at an okay space. But there's always room for improvement. There's always the possibility, if we keep seeing this trend year over year over year, it is going to kind of impact how we're able to serve more people with our largest voucher program that we have. Yeah, so I'll open it up for questions.
My biggest question is on that. You know, your 94% issue rate, HUD wants you at 98, you're showing at 94, you're still at this deficit. Is it a better pressure to be at 98 and then show that bigger deficit to HUD, saying like, we're meeting your 98%, and we can't just go and get our fees back from this housing authority to cover it?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think that, because when we hit the shortfall, they're kind of like, stop doing everything. So they're kind of like, we were having that conversation when we were meeting with the HUD and shortfall office at the same time. It was very lovely for something that could be very stressful. They're like, oh, you're doing everything that you need to do. So it felt very validating. That they're like, okay, good. Because, they meet with so many other housing authorities that might have had so many different circumstances. And so they're like, okay, we've already done steps 1, 2, 3. But since we just can't, and we share that with HUD, like, hey, this is great that you want that goal, but there's the funding gap for us just does not make sense.
Are you suggesting from a strategic perspective of trying to figure out how to get HUD to figure out how to redistribute the funds to us or have us keep more of our reserves? That is actually the ultimate question with HUD, is how to get more to our community. The problem was so many housing authorities were in shortfall at the same time.
Yeah.
So it is a broader, congressional appropriation issue.
One of the funding opportunities we applied for, and then they just had to say, nope, we actually can't, we couldn't even do that because all that funding is gonna have to go to all the shortfall agencies. So it was an opportunity we would have been able to see if we could have received more money to kind of continue to build our gap. And it was just kind of like, nah, it's for applying.
That's a tough balancing act.
Yeah.
Right? I'm at high usage, but I have a lot of reserves because I'm prudently deploying and planning for the future. But when the reserve gets too high, somebody wants to claw it back. Wow, it's a tough balance.
Yeah. And we're being compared to 3,000 other housing
Sure, right.
authorities, right?
Right.
And so that's where it sometimes does get interesting.
It's a good word. Thank you.
That is the kind of strategic questions we need to.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Right balancing act.
How much, this is completely off, how much work are you guys doing in sort of grant writing, in source of other sort of thinking out of the box funding sources to offset?
That is where we're hoping to explore and continue to explore with our MTW opportunities of how it can kind of pair with it. There's, with the restriction of funds, you can't, the way I understand it, you can't just like, oh, here we got a grant for an extra $1 million and we can just put that into our HAP. I think it just is for like overall cost, so then hopefully we can reduce some of the costs someplace else. So it is this kind of like balance. We're kind of always keeping an eye on it and see what is available. A lot of the times, just not finding a lot of opportunities that kind of directly correlate into how this could see, but always looking at them.
And I would say, in addition to, looking for the housing choice voucher funds, Liz has done a great job. We've got VASH funds, Meaningful Veterans Administration. We also are working in a bunch of different pools where a lot of housing authorities are not involved in, like COC. We also have regional local rent assistance, that's from the SHS. We also have the state money for the long-term rental assistance. So HCV is one pool of capital that Liz and her team manages, but she's now expanded, you can call it, all the opportunities to as much as possible. And that's where it is, you can call it, I would call it a managerial, very difficult thing to manage these different pots of money. Right. HCV is just one of the pots of money she manages.
Sure.
And thanks for saying that, because I think to kind of talk to piggyback off that and kind of align with your question too, is because of these regional funding, because of these other sources, the way that we operate and do it, our our inspections are, you know, like we're able to be more efficient on that, because we're not just inspecting for our voucher program, we're inspecting same across for all of the programs, and by doing that, we can have this staff up the appropriately way, and that funding distribution of that cost is being spread out across all of those funds. Versus if housing authorities that only have like linear one option, that balance of being able to do those requirements might be in jeopardy.
So you mentioned, what did you say, bonds? Grants. Money,
So,
other
yeah,
sources
yeah,
of money.
other sources of money. So, yeah, so that's my question. So is there a limit on like where the sources can come from? I mean, is it very restricted? Is that why? Yeah,
Well,
you
within
can't-
what you're,
Yeah.
within the rental assistance.
Yeah,
we're
within the
talking about
voucher
it,
program.
Are you restricted?
I think it,
I think similar, I think with Jill's.
right, yeah, I mean, yes and no, I think that there are restrictions, but it's case by case, and so we just have to like monitor the availability and like, can we use it, can we plug it in, or is it just creating a whole nother single thing that's not gonna impact?
We set a goal for ourselves, we're gonna seek every funding opportunity we
Right.
can if given the opportunity, and we have been successful in getting additional vouchers because we keep saying, yes, we'll take it. Yeah. The last 2 rounds, more youth foster and also BASH, more veterans assistance, not just in the last year.
Can I ask one more question that's gonna completely go down, hopefully, or not hopefully, a black hole? When the vouchers are paying for, the vouchers are offsetting the cost of the rent for the residents. Are residents also paying utility bills?
Yes. And we factor in, we have a utility allowance that we also have to publish, and that is based on we do a study, and then have a utility allowance. And so the like the tenant portion and how much subsidy we paid is based on the contract rent, and then there's what utilities the tenant has to pay for. We subtract that in for like costs for affordability. They need, when they're moving into a unit, it needs to be like no more than 40% of their income, you know, it's gonna be between 30 and 40%. There's a minimum of 30% that the household's gonna be paying. They could get a utility reimbursement, so if that household is at 0 income or such low income and they have like 5 people in it, they might be getting a utility reimbursement check from us for $100. So we're paying all of the subsidy or all of contract rent plus that utility reimbursement, but it is factored in to the overall cost.
Do you get the same discounted utility rate as low income people get then, or do you have to pay this instead?
We don't pay for them, so then our participants would then qualify for that on their own, and so that's why we have like a schedule that is like utilizing like utility costs based on averages.
So back to my original question about grants and such. So this is something that we're just talking about with some of our clients that are dealing with like the insurance challenges and constant eviction of residents. And the fact that there's a lot of grants money out there for sustainable efforts and cost to offset utility bills for residents. Where my brain was going was like, is there a sort of strategy or strategic way that the housing authority could think to find ways to get money that are grants that pay for sustainable efforts to offset the cost of utility bills so that you guys can then. I don't only begin to barely understand what you're talking about, so bear with me, but like. If there were strategies in a way to essentially reduce or minimize utility bills to residents. And the way you're doing that is by getting grants that are paying for a lot of these sustainable or solar or what have you, things to offset utility bills. Could that then help you guys to move around the monies in the vouchers so that, you know, that residents aren't using their vouchers or I don't know, there's surplus of money from a voucher standpoint. in a way, it like, just because there's just so much conversation, and I'm sure Ryan's familiar with this, I'm sure Nathan's familiar with this, like, there's a lot of grants out there and a lot of money through Inflation Reduction Act, through EPA, through, that everyone's, you know, trying to get a hold of and to balance things out, right? And so that's, I don't, like I said, I don't begin to really fully understand any of the voucher conversation and really how it balances, but I just trying to think of like other things you can do to balance out what residents are paying, so that there's surplus. If you can't otherwise accept these grants, like otherwise use grants like that because of the voucher program. I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm spinning.
No, I think what you're driving at is a great point. Because the HCV is going to a lot of landlords that are private sector and individuals. It's harder for us to get, say, ETO grants, EPA grants, CPRG grants into those projects because they already have the buildings, right?
Right.
It is probably a little easier when we're, say, working with Nathan or some of the affordable housing developers to put in clean energy or solar or more, you can call it green supportive fixtures.
Yes.
Right, because those are easier where you are we as a community are able to put in you can call it solar or any of those that reduce the cost to the ultimate resident. It is just easier when we are doing the HCV where it's a because they can go anywhere, it's harder to try to figure out how to do that targeted.
Okay.
It's better for public housing and our for water.
Okay.
And then we can get to some more.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the public housing, we went through and looked at our whole portfolio to see, for example, how much was gas, how much was electricity? What can we do to reduce greenhouse gases and everything? But it's harder when we are not directly involved in the buildings themselves.
Got it. Okay.
We do have a lot of strategies though, that hopefully we can, hit, knock on all the doors. If things are coming available, then we engage and we'll try to continue to improve our landlord training and so we can then talk to our landlords about, hey, these opportunities. As there's more ability for classes for family, like for our Family Self-Sufficiency Program, well, if it's about education or maybe job opportunities, we don't limit it just to people who are doing that. We want to make sure that our housing liaison has that resource they can share with all of our tenants so it can increase the opportunity for everyone. Or kind of like having those pointed conversations, like in the next year or two, we're really going to be trying to look at all of our households that are zero income and how much we can outreach to them. Like zero income, but you are also, looks like from our information that we gather from you, which unfortunately we have to gather a lot of information, you might qualify for some of these fixed incomes. And like, even if it's so somebody who's on SSI, they're paying about $190 a month for rent, so of their $700, $800 a month SSI award. And that, it sounds silly, that's like, that helps, but like, that helps us.
Oh, yeah.
It's not paying the entire amount. So,
Right.
like every time that we can talk, we continue to like work on all of the fronts is kind of where our goal is. And it's, so sometimes it's the smaller stones versus the bigger.
So that, question to my mind, so you were saying that in Oregon, the voucher counts as income, so when they go apply for rent, then it shows as income not, and so they don't get turned down. So do the individual landlords know that people have the voucher?
Yes.
Once they get in? Okay.
Yeah, so we issue a voucher, like it's literally a voucher, it's a HUD form too, and so they have that with them when they're going in shopping. They have our form, which is called a request for tenancy approval, or a RAPTA or an RTA, and that is once they've applied for the unit and they're giving that to the landlord, so the landlord can fill that out, so we know the makeup of the unit, we get it back. We check to make sure the unit is affordable. So it meets for the household, you make sure that it's reasonable, that the unit, the landlord is trying to charge for is similar to the other units in their property or around the area. that they're not trying to charge more to a voucher household. And then we have to, it triggers our inspection. And once it meets the past inspection, then that unit is eligible, that tenant moves in, we do a cap contract with the landlord, and then we start paying a subsidy.
So then to your question about, so can you target the landlord and say, we've got this program to improve your property, to lower utilities and such?
Yeah, we do, I mean, yes, I mean, we do like landlord engagement is important and we can kind of continue. We also are seeing 70% of our folks that are shopping, when they are shopping, are finding units, which is the higher than the national average, which that's good. I mean, people are finding units out there. We're having housing navigators or on their phone or with some assistance from our team members who are able to do that hand holding when needed. We don't have a lot internally though, because we just, but there have been certain cases where we're able to give a little extra TLC to somebody who's shopping.
And one other question, do you have numbers on how many people are in multi-unit family dwellings as opposed to detached and all of that?
We do have a lot of different data, so that is the data point.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And very different utility.
Yes.
For those two housing types.
And I think that's what my incorrect question originally, when you were talking about the cost per unit was stemming from, because single family or, standalone residences will be a different cost than an apartment.
Don't have that number off the top of my head. We have run different versions of that, especially when we do our utility allowance study and kind of looking at the makeup of our current portfolio of renters.
This is great discussion. We are starting to get closer to agenda. BNS? How are we on our-
We have one more thing to discuss. Are there any? You guys have done a really great job of explaining. Alicia did a great job of explaining the rental assistance division. Thank you for that report. The last item on the agenda is to discuss future topics that this panel would like to hear from staff. Is there anything else that you'd like to bring up or see brought up?
Wanted to go back to how is this new development panning out, and the long-term costs aren't being, rent's not covering the long-term maintenance costs of older projects, but the newer ones, how is that panning out? And how long is that sustainable? From a development side, all I'm hearing with the current market, the only development that's really panning out long-term is the 3-story walk-ups, and that's not what you are planning to develop, because that's not what the needs here. So,
there are also a rash of construction defects, but those, 2000s, well, 2-story walk-ups. It's interesting that come back around in favor.
Yeah, just this last year, and
because of the stick built.
Yeah, and it's also, you can do it without sprinklers, you can do it without elevators. So that's on the private development side of affordable housing, that's all they're considering right now. It's 3-story walk-up, because it's all they can get to pencil. The other side of that I'm tracking, but it's not necessarily true, steel prices might skyrocket in the coming couple of years. So that will increase your high density housing as well. And that's because the Middle East is taking a lot of steel for their construction. Just like 20 years ago, we had the concrete issue with China taking all the concrete for development. We might see a steel.
And you may be hearing this in your developments. I was talking with our construction folks. And
Create image.
There's still a
Summarize
lot of
text.
shortage.
Brainstorm.
Issues.
Help me write. More.
The electrical side.
Did AI take over?
Yeah.
Those were the notes from our meeting.
And if we get a president that slaps a 20% tariff on all this stuff, that probably won't help. Just random comment.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hang on.
And the other one I had, the graphs from the last meeting on where the housing units available fit within the how much people can afford. It showed that there's a ton of housing in the 30 to 100% AMI technically, but there's such a shortfall in the 0 to 30 and the 100 plus that it's stealing.
Get squeezed.
Yeah. That was very interesting, diving into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I know, when we're over time, I mean, what I was thinking about when you were making the presentation was, because Washington County has the highest rent, which I did not know, which is an interesting fact. You know, and I was worried about this when the SHS program rolled out too, that you're basically in a good way, but you're nonetheless injecting demand into the market, right? You're saying like, okay, we're gonna pay for all these rents. And are there enough units, right? And so if we have the highest rent in the state, obviously that affects the way you manage this program and the rents you're paying, which is similar for the SHS program. But to me, that says we need more units, right? And it's great if those are affordable units, that's great, but it's also okay if some of those are market units because it helps everyone, yeah. And including makes the resources you have in this would go a little further, right? So it's probably beyond the purview of this group, like.
We fixed that, we fixed the housing crisis.
I mean, right, and we let public resources go further.
Yeah.
I think a great future discussion would be to bring in our land use and transportation folks who are working on that housing production strategy, well, tied to the needs analysis. the
Yeah,
housing
yeah,
analysis. So we're trying to align more with them and that they're doing their work. What part of the toolkit are we providing? And I think your input on that would be crucial. So they're working, let's line it up for future
Yeah.
conversation in the new year.
Well, Ryan, your comment is, I bet you there's a geographic distribution of where the units, you know, are available, not
Oh, for
available,
sure.
right, within the topography.
Jess has a question.
She's muted.
You're on mute.
She unmuted.
Muted?
Mic's not working.
Oh, no, she is not on mute. Her mic just wasn't working.
Did we mute her accidentally?
No. No, we cannot hear you.
What did that symbol mean, Jacob, next to her name?
Now she's.
Now she's muted. Now she's not muted. The pin
Can
just
you hear
means
me
that.
now?
Yeah.
So sorry. Just on some of this discussion, I think Jill and I might also want to work together. We've gotten some, and bring back some further conversation here for discussion, but I think it's also interesting to think about how we are aligning the affordable housing inventory capacity with our homeless services vouchers. And perhaps that's not naturally occurring as we thought it would when tenants are out there searching with their rent assistance voucher. There, in early data, we're still gathering more information, but early data shows that there aren't actually that many people with ARLA vouchers living in affordable housing units. So to your question, Nathan, like about supply of housing and how we help, address those needs, I think there's an opportunity there for just kind of strategic programmatic alignment and partnership. So just a thought to put on the table for further discussion.
And as a, let's call it add-on to what Jeff was saying, I was talking with some of our affordable housing owners, and they were saying that there's not many HCV voucher holders in their units. Which is surprising to me because, for many of our affordable housing developer owners, they're at 60% AMI rent. And they're being squeezed because operating costs are increasing, but they're not getting the benefit of HCV, which is at 90% FMR, fair market rents. Right, so it could actually help them offset some of that cost. And also in many of these buildings, they already provide resident services like eviction prevention, food pantries, that kind of support. So it's interesting to me when I hear from our affordable housing owners that there is that mismatch. So we're, like I said, Jess and I are looking into that, how we help our HCV, shoppers also find units.
Yeah.
Perfect
I think it's my friend potential spam, sorry.
It's a very pleasant sound.
The other one's a motorcycle, so much apologies. Yeah, it's my friend potential spam.
So I wrote down a couple of topics that I thought I heard around the table for future land use and transportation. Oops, I didn't finish my sentence, but I heard that as a possible topic, and then affordable housing inventory with the voucher system. So
The first is more around bringing in LUT to talk about the housing needs analysis and housing production strategy.
there you go. Sorry, I didn't complete my thought. It just went on. Was there any other topics that the committee would like to have staff bring forward? All right, I'm not seeing or hearing more. I think that concludes today's business, unless I'm missing something. If I'm not, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good stuff.
Senior.